You're listening to the Fan2Fan Podcast, and on this episode, we're talking about the 1990 monster horror comedy, Tremors. Here we go.
I don't want to spoil anything for you, Peter, but the worm did it.
Oh my God. Wow, we're already off on the wrong foot or a tentacle, as it may be.
Speaking of, we're on Fan2Fan. I'm one of your hosts, Bernie Gonzalez. With me today, fellow co-host Pete Charbonneau.
Yep, still trembling.
There we go. With us, we have returning guest Josh Pruett at Zombie TARDIS on Instagram and Twitter. Primetime Emmy-winning writer, author, storyboard artist. Josh, in case you didn't know, let me remind you, you worked on Mystery Science Theater 3000, Phineas and Ferb, Last Kids on Earth, Doctor Who, currently working on Hamster and Gretel. Also have worked with various studios, including Disney, DreamWorks, Netflix, Nickelodeon, Paramount. Josh also co-wrote the middle grade novel Shipwreckers, The Curse of the Curse, Temple of Curses, or We Nearly Died a Lot, with, surprise Josh, co-writer Scott Peterson. Scott, also here today.
Wait, what?
What are the odds?
This guy.
What are the odds?
Who invited this guy? Oh, my God.
Scott, I've got some bullet points on you, so by all means, please correct me. You also are an Emmy Award-winning writer and producer, as your background shows. For folks that may not be able to see the video, there are literally Emmys in the background on the shelf there. Scott, you've worked on Phineas and Ferb, Last Kids on Earth. You've also worked as an animator, visual effects artist on movies including Jingle All the Way, Terminator 2, Die Hard 2, Batman Returns. Folks can find you at flagrantproductions.net. Pete, are you an Emmy Award-winning anything?
I think when I was in second grade, I had a classmate named Emmy that awarded me best speller in class. So from that standpoint, yes, I am, Bernie. I am an Emmy Award-winning character.
We're just thrilled to be in your presence, Peter.
We'll take it.
I mean, that's really what it is.
We'll take it 3 out of 4. And we're thrilled to talk about the 1990 movie, Tremors.
Welcome to perfection, where there's nothing new under the sun.
We plan ahead. That way we don't do anything right now.
But under the ground,
What the hell was
it's big,
These creatures are absolutely unprecedented.
it's mean, it's ugly,
Stinks, too.
and worst of all, it's hungry. Kevin Bacon, Tremors, rated PG-13, may be inappropriate for children under 13.
Movie that, Josh,
Yes.
you've been pushing for. I mean, I think we're going just about on a year.
I don't have my own podcast. I just I jump in on your hijack your guys' podcast.
You're more than welcome. More than welcome. But you've talked about this movie quite a few times. And Pete, the place where you and I have always kind of come into is like we've never either fully finished it or didn't have certainly the appreciation that Josh had for Tremors. But wait, there's more. Scott Peterson also loves this movie, so if we ever talk about it, you have to have Scott on. So, Scott, was Josh correct? Are you a fan of this movie?
Absolutely. I think this is the gateway drug into horror for anybody who's a little scared of it. It's like, this is the perfect movie to start with.
Yep. This was my, we'll get into the story, but this was like that home video that you could rent with, when you've got a sleepover for your birthday. That's how I saw this movie. But Scott and I, we talk about this movie, I don't know, a couple times a month. Every time we're talking about new projects, when we're building out characters and worlds and things, creatively, it remains like a real high watermark for how to build entertaining characters and you get all these wonderful monsters on top of it. And before we get started, I did want to throw a shout out to the Tremors Saga. So it's at the Tremors Saga on Twitter, and it's actually run by the team who wrote and produced the original first few films. Brett Maddock, S.S. Wilson, they're responsible for a lot of incredible movies that have really great heart and share a lot of the same DNA that Tremors does. I've been lucky enough to kind of strike up a friendship with that team over the last year plus and espouse and gush about how influential this movie has been. And also a big influence on one of our co-writers and collaborators, Max Brawlier, who created the Last Kids on Earth book series and who was executive producer with Scott on the TV series. But, he's got Tremors 2 references like in his books. This is part of our DNA. So that's why I wanted to make a big deal out of this.
No, for sure. Let's go back, Josh, to the, I guess, sans smart TV wood panel filled basement version when you saw Tremors. How old do you think you were, Josh, when you first saw this at this birthday party?
So if it came out in 1990, I definitely didn't see it in the theater because I was probably too scared.
Okay.
Because the original poster, it's actually one of the tentacles, the things that are inside the Graboids' mouths that's actually on the poster. So it's this funky thing where it kind of leads you down a different path of what you think you're getting into, which on the one hand is, misleading, but on the other hand is so great because they're not giving anything away. Like you're just seeing a piece of this creature. Anyway, it's wild. So I think it probably was 91, 92, because back in the day, it used to take a long time for stuff to get to VHS. Yeah, I would have rented this, I think, probably for a birthday party, having some friends over and being like, okay, if I've got like 3 or 4 of my best friends, I'm probably brave enough to watch this thing because I didn't know it was a comedy. I didn't have any sense of that. It looked cool, and I knew there was a monster involved somehow, and I was kind of hoping that it wasn't like a chest burster, so that I wouldn't be able to handle whatever that was, and just watching it and just laughing so hard and just not expecting it to be as funny and fantastic as it was, and just like watching Ferris Bueller when my family are in the same room, coughing over the 3 or 4 curse words that are in the movie just so that they don't get wary of us watching it again, and kind of haven't stopped talking about it since.
Or today.
I was going to say, yeah.
This is a monologue cast, not a podcast.
Well, Scott, let's throw it to you because unless you were fortunate enough to get invited to Josh's, epic birthday party back in 1939.
Scott's 40 years older than me. That's not possible.
I saw this in a dark room with lots of other people and paid to see it, like in a theater. And I was immediately impressed. It's like Josh said, whenever we're working on a project, or even when I'm pitching something around town, I use this as a reference of how you make characters that are funny in the way they react to something, but the threat is real. So these Graboids are going to kill people. They do kill people. And we never make a joke about that in the movie, but it's funny because of the way real human beings would react in this crazy situation. And so we try and use that in a lot of the things, like the book you mentioned earlier, that there's real threats, but funny reactions. And this was the touchstone for that.
Yeah, for the creative folks out there, I think one of the important things, one of the strengths, the superpowers of this movie is, and this is what Scott and I come back to over and over again, is that it's not parody. So the stakes are real throughout. So like Scott said, it's like, if you're trying to build something and it's like, there's a Mel Brooks version, and I'm a huge Mel Brooks fan. It's not a slight, but there's a parody and then there's satire like Shaun of the Dead, Miracle Werewolf in London, and Tremors. And those are touchstones that Scott and I come back to creatively all the time because the stakes are real and the characters are funny. The characters feel like people and love and are related to, but the threat is legit. You've got to get your ass out of there. That thing's going to eat you, but you're going to react like a person reacts. And like I said, I think that's a superpower that's present in this movie, and a lot of director Ron Underwood and writers Brett Maddock and S.S. Wilson's work. Like they worked on Batteries Not Included. They worked on Short Circuit was a script of theirs as well. And the kind of the through line of heart through their work, it's really perfected in Tremors, pun intended.
So Pete, let me ask you, because from two folks in Scott and Josh who are certainly dyed-in-the-wool Tremors fans, I think you and I probably have a similar story. So what was your first impression engagement with Tremors?
I definitely remember when it was released, and it was one of those that just kind of passed me by initially. I definitely go back to the days of renting the videos and my friends and I being in, it used to be on Real Video before Blockbuster took over, but being in Blockbuster and kind of just doing like laps around Blockbuster, and we would like slowly narrow down what movie we were going to rent that night. And Tremors was often on the list, and for whatever reason, we just never did it. So, this is one that just kind of disappeared from my radar, which I find it's interesting, Bernie, that you and I have consumed a lot. I think the scientific term is like a metric shit ton of pop culture. And the fact that we neither of us have actually sat down and seen the whole thing until last night is kind of wild, which is what I think is what will make this a good conversation with Scott and Josh. But
And just to
But
provide
yeah,
a little bit more context to that, Pete, because I really want to throw you under the bus on this one. You've seen Metal Storm: The Destruction of Jared Sin before you've seen Tremors, and just for you've probably seen Trolls 2 and the documentary of the making of Trolls 2 more times than you've seen any Tremors movie.
Yeah, there's no fault in those facts that you just laid out there.
I think it's so interesting that it's a really specific blind spot, but for both of you.
Yes.
Like that kind of blows my mind a little bit because there's so much other overlap in the stuff that we love and that we grew up watching and like even our taste. And so it's really fascinating to me that like this one missed you guys completely.
Well, I will say I did have some reservations isn't the right word, but there was a specific thing. So when I was younger, because I was thinking about this, about like why, I hadn't seen it up until this time. And spoiler alert, I get it now. Watching it last night, totally get it.
Right.
Great experience. Loved it. But there was a time when I was younger where I needed my horror and my comedy separate. Yes. If there was something that I was told had like comic elements to it, I kind of just did a little bit like, I don't know. This is why, like, when I first saw Evil Dead 2, I'm like, I really like Evil Dead better because I wanted to be scared. So, like, I went into horror wanting to be scared. Maybe you'd have, like, the occasional line, like, in a Friday the 13th movie or something like that, or Nightmare on Elm Street. You'd be like, okay, well, that's okay. It's like a throwaway line or something. But when it was mixed, it was almost like oil and water for me. I was just kind of like, nope. But now that I've gotten older and I can appreciate where the creators were coming from, and I again love to hear your takes on some of the background, because the character development, like Josh, what you were saying, like like the Graboids aren't in on the joke, they aren't in on like the jokey character, so like they're just there to do their thing in terms of propelling the story forward, of like killing the people of the town of perfection. So you don't get when the one runs into like the aqueduct, you don't get like like something like the bird like tweeting because it's knocked itself out or killed itself. So it's not like you said, it's not parody, it's satire. And I can totally appreciate it now, where when it was out in the early 90s, I was a little more averse to that style of film. So that I think
that's a great observation too, Peter, because I think there's a lot of people who feel that way. And and we've talked on this show about like me trying to talk my buddy Mike into watching Doctor Who, because there's time travel getting in his alien story. He can't hang. And it does seem like, getting this right, and the kind of people who appreciate this out the door, it's a little bit rarefied air, because it has to do with that palette. And certainly I feel like the filmmakers intended it to be as wide as possible. And that's why it's not super violent. And that's why there isn't a whole lot of cussing in the movie or like inappropriate content. Yeah, you're right. So, some of that is like a taste thing. Yeah, like a lot of people who really like horror, they don't necessarily want that, the little bit of joke in there or character in there in the same.
So Bernie, yeah. So Bernie, what's your history with Tremors and not seeing it up until now?
Funny that our stories are similar, because I would have been in junior high when this came out. I graduated high school in 96, and we weren't a movie theater going family, and we didn't really get a VCR until probably maybe like my junior year in high school. So by the time I got a membership to the local mom and pop, I'm watching movies that, Scott, you worked on, like Time Cop. I mean, movies that, and I've mentioned this before, where I was watching Highlander on TV, and this was my first opportunity to see the non-TV edit of a movie like Highlander or Universal Soldier. So I was leaning towards movies like that. It wasn't until college, where Tremors were certainly on the shelf, but I was skipping that to watch movies like Evil Dead and Evil Dead 2, getting in on the joke that it seemed like everyone else was on. Give me some sugar beam. I'm like, I don't know. I don't understand the reference. And now I feel like Captain America, like I get the reference. So I'm, freshman, sophomore in college, kind of making up for a lost time. And Tremors was always in that blind spot where it seemed like it was perpetually on cable, readily available at every video store shelf. So it wasn't for lack of options. And it wasn't for folks who were in my ear saying, skip this movie, don't watch it, it's not worth your time. On the contrary, I think everyone I've met were closer to like Scott, you, Josh, like, hey, this is a great movie. Why haven't you given us a chance? Because you've watched a bunch of other, like you said, a metric shit ton of stuff. How did this get past you? So I really enjoyed watching Tremors, watching it, I think, from this perspective, having seen that metric shit ton of bad movies, appreciating the movie because I have a little bit more, I don't know, a little bit more maturity, I guess. At least that's what it says on the driver's license. But I also think I'm not looking over the fact that when we were talking about Assault on Precinct 13, Pete, being John Carpenter fans, the fact that we were able to talk to you, Josh and I, about your first time watching a John Carpenter movie, how many times in our ages say that you're discovering a movie from someone whose work you really love. Right. You've watched The Thing, you've watched Halloween, you've watched Prince of Darkness, Escape, and you're like, I've just never seen Assault. Oh my God. And you start seeing it with the hindsight of knowing the Carpenter isms. Something with Tremors, it's like, oh wow, this is really cool because another movie that you worked on, Scott, The Relic, that I loved, that I did rent a ton of times, and damn it, that's the only reason why I know about the hippocampus. I'm telling you, it's because of The Relic. But it's kind of in that 90s almost classic monster movie vein. So I'm glad that I was able to watch it. And in some ways, I'm kind of glad that I was able to watch it now because I think I would not have appreciated it having seen it in mid-90s or even in the early aughts.
Was your experience like mine, Scott, where like after you kind of found it and then fell in love, like you found yourself kind of defending it over the years?
Okay, I'm going to back up from that and answer that after I answer this, which is, because I thought you were going to ask me this, is did it affect me at the time? And there are two movies where when I left the theater, I actually physically changed. And one was Raiders of the Lost Ark, where I came running out of the theater and I was jumping on rocks and flying around and doing the soundtrack in my head. And Tremors was the one I walked out of the theater and I thought, I can't get on the ground. Like I literally had that feeling of I can't touch the ground. And then I realized, oh, no, the movie's over. You're fine. But I still was like, I'm going to stand on this bench for a minute.
Rad. It's safe on this bench, probably.
Yeah, yes. I literally, it was so effective that way. And then, I was trying to evangelize it to people, and everybody's like, a lot of people weren't horror fans that I was hanging around with. They're just like, And I'm like, no, but it's more than that. They didn't buy it.
It's for everybody.
And it's funny because like the movie is not, it's not a horror movie. It's not an adventure movie or an action movie. It's actually all of those things and a comedy. It's all of the above. But here's the context, Josh. You know I love context. 1990.
Bring it.
One comes out. I had to stop because I was like, all right, I just don't want to type anymore. This is too many. Home Alone, Misery, Dances with Wolves, Goodfellas, Pretty Woman, Ghost, Total Recall, Edward Scissorhands, and of course the classic Ernest Goes to Jail. But when you think about that and a ton of other stuff that came out that year, that certainly would have overshadowed Tremors. It kind of makes sense that Tremors found its audience as a cult film, as a film that had, and Pete, we've talked about it, the earnest awfulness where, the movie has to be made with love because you can't, you can make a Sharknado, but it doesn't have the cult following of, because it's Fred Ward and Tremors, Remo Williams. I mean, that's a movie that I saw as a kid with my dad. We loved it. And as I got older, I was seeking the Blu-ray release for a movie that very few people have ever heard about, but a movie that was in that wheel well of when you find a Remo Williams fans, like you found your tribe, because there's not a lot of us out there, but Tremors has a slightly larger tribe. But when you see all those movies in 1990, it makes sense that the fans it found were diehard fans because you might have been in line for Ghost or Home Alone, but then when you're at the video store a year or two later, after Home Alone is not available because Pete and his cousin took it when they were there before, then what are you left with? Tremors. And you have a hell of a great experience because you're like, hey, the movie that wasn't my first choice is still awesome. Like, it makes for a great Friday night.
Actually, what my cousin and I took was Witchboard with Tony. Hey, that's what we did.
I was renting Frankenhooker, so I'm right there with you.
Remember, you can find the Fan2Fan Podcast at www.fanpodcast.com. Facebook, just search Fan2Fan Podcast. That's FAN, the number 2, FAN. On Instagram at Fan2Fan Podcast or on Twitter at Fan2Fan Podcast. We'd love to hear from you, so send a message and let us know what you think of the show. Thanks.
And now, on with the show.
The thing, one of the things I want to build on, Bernie, that you mentioned, where it's like, it's not easily identifiable, and certainly maybe that made it tough for it to find its audience at the time, where it's fun and funny, and it has action, and it has scares, and it has monsters, but the fact that it doesn't fit nicely into a genre, quote-unquote, you could say it's a monster movie, but it's a really successful monster movie in that it's intelligent and smart and funny and entertaining kind of throughout. There's no boring parts. It's like, as a fan of monster movies my whole life, giant rubber monsters are great, but all the parts with the stupid people who don't know what to do are so insanely boring, which is the gift of Mystery Science Theater that fills in all that stuff. And then the rubber monsters show up. But like, I think about a movie, The Host, came out in 2006, directed by Bong Joon-ho, amazing, Academy Award winning Korean filmmaker. But that movie about this insane fish monster, toxic waste fish monster that, lays siege to Seoul's Han River. At the core of it is this really likable, hilarious family unit. And in the same way that we have this family unit in perfection, we have all these different characters who color this world. The thing with The Host is that it's everything. It's scary, it's funny, it's heartfelt, it's sweet, it's sentimental at times. You're rooting for them. So I think that one of the key things that's missing in a lot of horror movies and a lot of monster movies that this movie does so well, we love Val and Earl from the first 3 seconds, right? Like
Hands
Earl's
down.
waking him up in the morning. And yes, certainly the charisma of these actors, it's like we have Kevin Bacon, we have Fred Ward. They both are gifted actors who make their characters, it doesn't seem like they're doing anything, right? It doesn't seem like they're acting. They are just characters that we're watching on screen. They seem real and utterly believable. That's what's so special about Tremors, is that it's trying to do this thing that we all know, which is most monster movies are boring until the monster shows up. And the thing that's so rad about Tremors is that you're laughing and engaged until the monster shows up, and then it gets better.
Yeah. I would go even further than saying in the first 10 minutes. I think in the first shot of the movie, it's a joke and it's a setup. You've got this huge cliff, which you don't realize they're setting up for the finale. Spoiler alert.
So good.
And it's Kevin Bacon peeing off the cliff. It's good old word, just peeing out in the open. So the first shot tells you what this movie is.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm assuming that was a matte painting that they opened up on. I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
I'm like, you low budget, and they're going right off like opening scene matte painting. I'm like, that's pretty ballsy move. I like that.
Well, his balls are out. So
That's true. That's ballsy and balls out.
I think that's appropriate.
I'm going to imagine, Scott, you were also a fan of Harryhausen and all the Atomic Age monster movies. Do you see like a lineage between those and then Tremors?
I haven't made that connection. To me, it's got a direct connection to Jaws. So if you look at the poster, it's basically the Jaws poster of this thing coming up from below. I know when they were first workshopping this movie, they called it Land Shark. So it's literally this thing underground, and they do the same kind of things that Spielberg did in Jaws, where they're hiding it for most of the movie. And certainly the first half, you don't ever see that there's a giant creature, and part of that's budget. If we keep it underground, we don't have to see it. We don't have to pay for it. But part of that is letting it grow in the mind of the viewer. And it could be whatever you think it is. And it's scarier when you don't get to see it. And then it makes this huge impact when it finally comes out of the ground with every single cast member surrounding it in the middle of the town. And oh my God, it's here. And it's worse than we ever thought. But to me, it's that Jaws feeling of we don't know what it is, but we see the after effects of it passing by.
That's perfect context. Just makes so much sense because, even seeing the movie poster, it's like, of course, that's exactly what it is. And the fact that then the writers, the director, then tried to make it a bit more family friendly, seems like in the post-production, to try to maybe get to a broader audience, to maybe have a little less coughing from the Pruett household to mask the occasional, swear words that were popping out there. But I think that's the interesting thing talking to you guys. You guys have lived with this movie for much longer. You've rewatched it a few times. You're looking at it not just as a movie you enjoyed, but then also from the production piece of it. Like, how does this tell an effective story? How can you learn from it? How can you mirror that in some of your own work? So what is it about Tremors? What makes it so interesting or how does it pop up in your works?
I think one of the reasons that I really like it from a structural standpoint is how great it is at setting things up that are going to pay off later. I always go back to like Back to the Future has so many things in the first 10 minutes that then come back as jokes later on. And this does the exact same thing. You've got the peeing off the cliff, which is going to be the big finale. You've got Kevin Bacon's second line. He's talking about a stampede, which is also part of the big finale.
That's right.
You've got a kid with a basketball, a girl in a pogo stick, a vibrating Coke machine, all these things that just seem like little throwaways are all going to come back, and you start to realize, oh crap, every single thing these people are doing is going to kill them. So it's clearly been thought out ahead of time of slowly laying this out, but setting us all up for what's going to be these exciting things later. Which is really smart to me.
There's like a craft at work. That tells me that the filmmakers gave a damn. Like when you're watching these movies, everyone who's listened to me on this show knows I love bad movies too, and have actually learned a lot more from bad movies than good ones over the course of my career. But I feel like when you're watching a movie that's as well crafted as this, it's like you are in very sure hand. And certainly when you're watching the fun behind the scenes and all that stuff, they didn't, the filmmakers didn't always feel like that. It wasn't an easy movie to make, it sounds like, by any stretch. However, I think the finished product, it so feels handmade in the best way.
Was Wilson and Maddock the writers? Do you think, was it intentional from what you guys know, the craft, like the very incredibly solid structure of the script that then,
well, I think it's a good question, Bertie, because I think one of the things is that director Ron Underwood is also credited as a story. So I think when the guys had this thing, they were building in tandem and then crafting. I think there's something that often gets lost in filmmaking and even in animation. The Sky Knight's background is like, you want to think visually. And what's so interesting about a lot of the things that Scott pointed out about these setups, those are all visual. Those are all actually things that for an audience to key into, and it's no slight against these screenwriters who are some of my favorites of all time. But I think often as writers, we can sometimes get focused on the words. And I think when you're crafting a movie, it's images, and it's like, not to be didactic about it, it's the stuff needs to work visually. It can't just be clever lines and interesting dialogue. It needs to all work together. And I think all those instruments in the orchestra, right? And I think that's what's so cool about this movie is that it manages to do that. And, granted, the standard for monster movies is not particularly high. Our affection for them really comes from these dumb rubber monsters. But I think often it's like, because these things are left by the wayside, this was a hell of an opportunity that this team put together. And like Scott said, I think it is called Landshark. They knew where they were headed. I think the fun part of this is that when it goes into that monster movie place, and we're getting those wonderful explanations of what this is one Scott and I always talk about, where they go, it's like, what's the origin of these things? And it's so fantastic because, number one, they're dramatizing the exposition, so they're literally on these rocks and they're trying to figure out what these things could be. And it's like you have one character throw out, well, it's nuclear this. You have another character throw out, well, they're ancient, it's primordial, or they're from outer space. And it doesn't matter because they're going to get eaten if they don't figure out how to get past it. And it's such a beautiful piece of writing and performance that really, that's what everyone thinks when they're watching this stuff. Yeah, cool. It's a great discussion topic, but it doesn't matter if you're going to die. It just, for me, that's one of the high points of the movie, because it encapsulates all those things that we love about monster movies, and then it elevates it to this really smart place. We're not being condescended to. So the writers and filmmakers aren't condescending to the material, but they're also not condescending to the audience. We are all in this together. And I think that's part of what makes Tremors so special.
So Josh, are you saying that then the movie was too smart for Peter and Bernie? That's why they didn't see it.
Scott, I texted you before not to bring that up.
Well, sorry.
You actually texted it to me, Josh. Just
dang it.
It's funny because you guys mentioned that. That was like, I put that on my notes that the plot is very economical. The script itself is very sturdy. I've read this before, that there is kind of this tipping point regarding the number of characters that you can have in a work of fiction. And it seems to me like that the theory behind it is there is a bridge too far in his number as characters. And while everyone in perfection is not necessarily well-rounded, all of them seem to serve a very specific purpose, even if it is the kid that was it Bobby Jacoby, who reminds me of the kid from the older brother Wayne from Wonder Years, but turns out he's actually from Wizards of the Lost World Part 2.
Wizards of the Lost Kingdom Part 2.
Yeah, that's that kid. But like you mentioned, Scott, before, the basketball dribbling, that's this is just the annoying kid that does pranks. And even in something that may seem like a throwaway, random annoying kid who we don't know his parents, we don't know his background. We don't need to. What matters is he's part of this crew, part of the townsfolk. He's dribbling a basketball. And in very short time, you're going to realize why that's not a good thing in this movie.
Well, Scott, there's a real estate thing about characters. Scott, if you want to share a little bit about that, what you need to be thinking about when you have so many characters.
The more characters you have, the less time you have to do anything. So you have a tiny bit of time to show who this person is. And I think the way that Tremors does it so well is they make sure that nobody is there to serve a purpose for the script. It's always for the character. So whether that's, Burt Gummer, he's not there just because they need somebody who has guns. He's there because he believes this is what man needs to prepare for. He's the survivalist. And so he's fighting for what Burt believes in every single scene, as opposed to just he shows up because, we need somebody who's got guns. So when you take a character or the dumb kid, he wants to get attention. And so every single scene, he's trying to get attention, not because we need to lure everybody out of the store to see the monster, but because they're pissed at him, because he's doing the same shit he always does. So
Little Boy Who Cried Wolf is is a great runner for that character.
Yeah. So it's, if you've got 10 seconds with a character, show what that character wants, and you'll clue into who that is.
I think the other thing they do really well is, and this is something that I try to remember when I'm doing my own stuff, and I'm not always successful, is like when, you sometimes will start with a stereotype because your audience understands that really it's a quick read. So, but I think the beauty part in this movie is that they deepen it. So then it's something closer to like an archetype. So it's like, you've got your single mother character, and so you have all of the kind of indicators for that, but they give her a little more. Like, she gives people shit. She busts chops. She's not just one note. And it's like they maybe only have time for 3 or 4 notes, but all of those things, I think hit really successfully. One of the things, Peter, I wanted to ask you, because you just watched it so recently, is, okay, it's 2022. This movie came out in 1990. You're watching this thing. You pointed out the matte painting, right?
Mm-hmm.
What did you make of the physical effects? You grew up watching stuff, monster movies, horror movies that had, big dumb rubber monsters, like all of it. Like, you're familiar with that. So
Munchies 2,
Roll 2, which we've established, right? So, like, what did you kind of make of like the Graboids and all that, how that worked in this movie?
I thought they did a phenomenal job. I think you guys are bringing up so many points that were kind of dancing through my head as I was watching it last night, so that it's great that, I feel smarter now than I would have earlier. But I don't want to speak for all of you, but I think we're probably all huge fans of practical effects when you can get away with it. And so the practical effects were great. And I think what I appreciated now watching it in 2022, that I would not have appreciated watching it in 1990 me would have pointed out the parts where, like, oh, that's just, someone's arm in the Graboid tentacle. And that would have taken me out, and I would have been annoyed. I'm like, these effects aren't great. Watching it now, I just have so much love and appreciation for what they made work within this budget. And I think, you were touching on this earlier, Josh, but I think budgets obviously can be very confining, but I think what Tremors does really well is the invention that was born out of that confinement turns into something that is just really engaging and fun. And that's just putting aside the story points that you and Scott have already brought up. But I think just in terms of creating this world that could have looked really cheap, could have looked really cheesy, but for what the budget was, they made it work. They made it believable, and it completely sucks you right on in. So I was frankly kind of blown away. I was blown away with the effects and the camera work, especially. I was making a lot of note of the camera movement, a lot of POV shots. Again, before the big reveals, which was great. And then there was like that one subtle shot of when Burt and I forget Reba McEntire's character's name, but when they're battling the one in their basement, and they're starting to shoot at it, and also the camera just does like slight pan to the wall, and they've got the wall of guns, which is just, again, I mean, that's just again, that's not script, that's just showing. But what a great comedic moment that was. I really enjoyed it.
It's amazing. There's a little bit of optical work in there. And like the other thing that kind of blows my mind about this movie too is like you've got this crossover of effects talent, which is kind of like perfect. We've got half of K&B, we've got Howard Berger, and we've got Robert Kurtzman on physical effects. And then we also have Alec Guinness and Tom Woodruff Jr., who would do work with, we're just coming up, I think, Pumpkinhead, and working with Winston on Aliens. There's also Mark Rappaport, who did a lot of work in the Full Moon days, would go on to do a lot of stuff with the Puppet Master series. But like there was just so much talent kind of on this movie, and the tangibility of these effects, the combination of all of these different effects approaches where we have matte paintings, we have opticals, we have scale models, a lot of scale work. It's so much damn fun. Like they really used all the toys in the toy box with this thing. But I think it holds up. And I think a lot of it is because there's not a lot of stuff in this movie that takes you out of it effects-wise.
I love that most of it takes place during the day in bright sunlight too.
Right.
I mean, there's always something to be said. I want to say it was like Rob Bottin made the comment when they're talking about creating the thing.
Yep.
You know, like he can get away with a lot with shadows because it doesn't have to look perfect because the shadows can kind of help you. And I totally get that. I thought it was a brilliant observation on his part. But another thing I loved about this movie is that everything is just out in the open. It's bright sunshine, California, but supposed to be Nevada, but like your Southwest desert, and everything is just like right there out in the open. And again, I was watching this and I can totally see how this inspired you all to kind of your creative talents to flow from this, because again, you're looking at something, this isn't something like Spielberg where there's just so much money and every cent is on screen and you can see it. It's the top of the line. It's ILM. It's just like the best effects the money can buy. This was something that was done and you can tell like they were just in there just doing it. And I think it's inspiring because it allows someone that has a creative bent to be like, I could do something like this and I don't need to have top dollars to make it work. I see this as being just like a huge tentpole of kind of like setting off like a bunch of people like you guys that saw it at that age to be like, I can go do, maybe it's not movies, but whether it's books, animation, whatever.
Right.
Just offering like a template to be like, oh yeah, this can be done. This could be a career that I can have.
The thing I think is amazing is it's not only was it low budget, but it was his first directing gig. Other than doing, I think he did educational films or something beforehand.
Yeah.
But this was his first directing gig, and it worked so well. And sometimes I think that helps is when you know how to do small things. You don't have to go and make a $10 million shot. But I think that undersells his talent because you can make an okay movie, but this is a phenomenal movie for me.
It's funny, like the movie doesn't have a lot of room for cheating. The economy of the budget, the economy of the cast, the economy of the location, where it really is isolated. It doesn't take us to a lot of places because this locale in the day is exactly where we need to be. It seems like that economy is the slingshot for the creativity. It forced the folks on the creature effects side. But I think that's where, like, going back to the cast and something that you'd mentioned earlier, Josh, because we get such a well-rounded duo in Earl and Val from the beginning. Like, there is no cheat code to this movie. If they don't pull it off in that first scene, because we don't get to see the movie, the monster for some time in the movie, it doesn't work. But it's still not enough. They can only be so charming for so long before they might wear their welcome and the rock, paper, scissors thing wears off. But the one thing I noticed watching it is we see so many times in movies like this where the caricature would be the blue-collar laborers, seemingly undereducated. They have a beer at the bar, and then they always talk about how they're going to get out of this town. Except in this movie, they actually pack up the pickups and get out of the town. But for all of these other things that happen to them that kind of draw them back. Friend of theirs dies on the electric wire. It's like, hey, well, we got to bring his body down, and then the crew and the rock slide and all of these things happen. But these folks were not the caricatures that are like, well, you know what? If I won the lottery or if it could do right for myself, I'd be out of here. It's like these guys actually got out of here and turned down the beer that would have got him a job for a few months. Yeah, I think that's what I think. Probably, again, going back to Pete, your point, that's probably why Scott and Josh love this movie, because now having seen it, I'm like, yeah, I kind of want to rewatch it to see it through a little bit of their lens, the stuff they've been talking about wow, there's so much stuff going on here and so much stuff that is incredibly impressive.
Well, and I love that observation too, Bernie. It's like that's that stereotype thing, and then they're turning it into, they're deepening it. So it's like, no, instead of just talking about leaving, they leave, and then they literally waited a day too long. Like, and I think the thing that I think one of the bajillion things I love about it is like, that's funny alone. The idea of these guys who are like, no, man, I'm going to do it. We got it. No, come on, let's go. And literally they pick the worst day to go because there's like an invasion of like underground monsters. Like, that's so great.
There's also the part with like, you've got the townspeople who are gathered together, and going back to maybe more like a earlier, again, atomic age creature feature, like in War of the World, alien menace has arrived. Everyone comes together. You put aside your religious beliefs, military. We have to fight this bigger threat that's bigger than all of us combined. In this one, Victor Wan's character is like, yeah, I'm going to have kids take pictures of this and I'm going to make some money off of it. It's not the townspeople coming together with the pitchforks to fight the menace. It's, hey, in our reality, making $5 or $10 off of a sideshow, it makes sense for what the people in Perfection, what their day-to-day is like.
But I think it also goes to that thing, Scott, you were talking about of like, these are just people. So there's this archetype thing or stereotype, right? It's like you talked about the military, Bernie. Like, there's this funny thing in like almost every monster movie from the 50s and 60s where it's like military base, daughter of the military boss.
Oh, sure.
Like it, right? It's all the time. Like just like there's literally 35 of them and they all have that same element. And it's like, no. This is like in the town with Walter Chang's restaurant. And he's going to do, what's Walter going to do? He's going to find the angle because he's got to figure out how to make money in this town. And it's like, no one lives in it, right? Like that, I love that so much because it comes from this. And it's like, we're all just speculating, but it comes from this instinct of like, no, what would that character do? It's like Scott mentioned, it's like, it comes from a character. It doesn't come from joke and it doesn't come from the needs of the plot. It's the character. So Walter is a dimensional character who owns a shop in this place. He has a role in the town, not in the story, in the town. And so he behaves that way, right? He's going to look for the angle. And like, I love that the guys are ripped off in 30 seconds. So they buy the thing, they think they've made money, and then he's doubled that money within 5 minutes. Like, it's so freaking hilarious. Bernie, are there any set pieces that really stand out for you?
The pole vaulting over the residual boulders was interesting from from like a technical standpoint, where you basically almost see them in silhouette. And the fact that they're kind of in unison, it's kind of like a sight gag, but at the same time, I think it starts to, like getting a little bit more deeper. It's like, yeah, these three folks getting in sync because they are now aware of the threat. Like they have that little kernel of knowledge that the townspeople don't know. And because they understand there's a threat, and we have this grad student that can throw a bunch of lingo at us, but in the end is still kind of like synthesizing it to be like, hey guys, they're under the ground, and if we make noise, it draws them. And then I think as the viewer, I'm like, yeah, like that all worked because the drill, because of the basketball, like, yeah, if you put it all together, it works. But that one scene, yeah, now this trio is our heroic trio, and they're going to go to the town, and I want them to make it because when you see the girl on the pogo stick, you're like, oh no, like you guys have done such a good job of connecting these dots for me, like you mentioned, Josh, visually, again, where all these characters are so like, I don't know, they just feed right into each other in Val and the joke, right? Like he's looking for a certain type of woman, and if it doesn't fit within his definition, then he's just not interested. And of course, the grad student just doesn't
the opposite of that.
It doesn't work. But it's like you start seeing those little glimmers around that scene where it's like, yeah, she may not be the girl of your dreams, but she may be the girl that you need right now to save you guys and the rest of this town. So she's part of the trio now. She's part of the group. She's, so.
And she's not a damsel on... Go ahead.
Yes, and she's not a damsel in distress. Absolutely.
She's not.
Yeah.
Well, I say she almost, they could have played her as the science type, because I kept There's echoes of the movie Them at points watching this.
Yes, for sure.
Certainly like in the lead up to it, like, there's like, when you're still not sure what the creatures are, like when they find the guy up in, in the tower and things like that. I'm like, oh, there's a lot going on here that was reminding me of that. But then as much as I love Them and it's a classic, like what you guys said, it hits that point when the military comes in, the scientists come in, and it kind of hits that screeching halt where they have to do all these exposition about. And she could have played that role, but then they kind of start peppering her with questions because, oh, well, you're out here, you're a seismologist, whatever. She's like, I don't have the answers. I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah.
In the dark as you are.
But the characters are smart as well. You don't have people, running up the stairs into the dark, those kind of things that you scream at the movies about. These are characters who get confronted with a problem, they solve it. They're confronted with another problem, they find a way to solve it, and they get smarter as they go along. And the villain gets smarter as they go along. Mm-hmm. The actual Graboid monsters figure out, oh, okay, you're effing with us this way. Now I'm going to try this. And they start doing, plans. And the kind of the theme of it in terms of character arc is that, the Kevin Bacon character never makes plans. And so it's all about making plans. And that's both sides of this equation start making plans to take each other down. And so like you said, it's smart for the audience, but it's great to see smart characters. Maybe they're not educated, but they don't do dumb things that get them killed.
And if they do anything dumb, it's totally in character. It's not something that kind of pulls you out of the film. And I think as horror movie fans, and we all four of us are, it's like that. We understand that's like part of the package. But in this, they don't do that. And it still is hard. I think that pulls you in as a viewer. I'd much rather be rooting for people making good choices, and it's still hard.
Yeah, it makes me and the audience go, oh shit, what would I do in that situation? It makes it feel real.
Later 80s horror just kind of lead into that, well, let's just have some really dumb characters because we know the audience likes yelling at them on the screen when they do dumb things. And so they could have gone that route because that certainly was in fashion around that time. But, they, again, decided like, well, no, we're just going to react against this.
You've got Gil Ann Hurd producing, who co-wrote Terminator with Cameron and produced most of his movies. Gil had great instincts. I wish for the sake of these filmmakers, this thing was a gigantic hit when it came out, because that would have been so wonderful for them and for their careers. And it's like, instead, we ended up getting this treasure of a movie that I'm going to be talking about the rest of my life. So, I feel like part of my job now is to espouse on their behalf. Because, it wasn't a giant hit, and I think it deserved to be because it's that good of a movie.
Speaking of movies, Scott, you've worked on quite a few movies, including Bill and Ted's Bogus Adventure, Patriot Games, The Relic, Time Cop, Tank Girl, TV shows like Phineas and Ferb, Teutonstein, Danny Phantom. You've worked on different books for Disney, Tangled, Descendants, Jungle Book, and then also, obviously, the book that you and Josh wrote together, Shipwreckers. When you have a movie like Tremors that makes such an impression, I have to imagine that it influences, it pops up in your work as an artist, as an animator, as an executive producer on a show. Can you kind of go into that?
I think it's one of many. I think a lot of times, at least in animation, we use shorthand to get ideas across. So instead of trying to describe something with a lot of words, you go, oh, it's like the scene where Indy takes the idol and the ball starts rolling.
Okay.
That's that vibe. And so people are like, got it. And so a lot of things from Tremors are the same way, where I'll say, oh, it's that same feeling of you're trapped on a rock. You can't go anywhere. What am I going to do? You've got that hopeless feeling. And so it's another one of those touchstones you can use to get an idea across to somebody, assuming they've seen it, not like you two bozos. But I'm surprised.
You're not wrong. You're not wrong.
A lot of times I'll reference it and I'll say, hey, I'm not sure if this is a good reference for you guys, but Tremors, blah, blah, blah. And most of the people are like, oh, yeah. I don't know that I develop the characters and their intelligence in the same way that Tremors does. I'm not that good yet, but I'd love to. I aspire to be.
And Scott and I do definitely talk about when we're building characters, things like that opening sequence, and we talk about character behavior and how to see it. It's often in that conversation, I think, for all the reasons that we're talking.
Do you guys know, was this script in development? I'm talking for the original. Was the script in development for a while? Was that a quick turnaround? And then on top of that, talking about how the characters were so well developed in the original Tremors, they have time to kind of refine that script and work on it, as opposed to the sequels where maybe it was more of a rush job.
Scott, what do you think?
Yeah, I would imagine they had more time. You know, when you're first working on a script, there's no budget, there's nobody waiting. I talk about the train leaves the station when you're on a project, and at a certain point, you've got your storyboard artists on it, you've got your animators on it, you've got and you've got to keep going. But before you ever start, you've got basically all the time you want until it's where you think it's in a good place. So I'm sure they had more time for the first one than for 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6.
Yeah, and sometimes I think, Peter, to your question, like it's like time is not always the solution. Sometimes when someone pulls the trigger, Scott, I feel like, and I experienced this with writing Shipwreckers, like we had a deadline. So, we knew what the story was and we beat it out, and then we split it up and we got those chapters done and we wrote it fairly quickly. We knew a lot of the shape of the story, and the story arcs, were real clear to us. But even, like working on Last Kids on Earth, the animated series, it's like part of the nature of the beast. You see it in storyboards and you punch it up again. You punch the script up together as a team. There's many stopping points where you can plus it. And I think on live action, it's harder. I mean, I know you'll see fun fixes in ADR, where they're throwing dialogue here and there to cover plot points or to throw a joke. But for my money, I think live action's harder a little bit because you've only got what you got on the day. But I think sometimes it's like workshopping those characters, right? Like having a table read, getting the voices of those characters ahead of time. So maybe those actors who are going to inhabit those characters, they get to add to that. It's like we talked about performance early on in our chat today. It's like, I think the performances of these actors are, a huge component of the success of those characters because we love them. Like even that, the acting style, right? There's nothing in this movie that's showy, right? Like everything is as tangible as the City of Perfection itself, right? There's something about the tone of this. I've said this before, it's grounded, pun intended, right? Like this all feels very normal. All these people feel very normal, which is the fun of these giant monsters showing up and ruining everybody's day.
All of these movies that we've all loved, like they're all in that 93 to 96 minute range. Buckaroo Banzai, just about anything Carpenter has done. You mentioned Evil Dead 2 before, Pete, when I go back to like Remo Williams, but they've all given us just enough that we want more. Like I want that 94th minute of Remo Williams. I want to see the adventure continue into a sequel. Like I want to see more, especially like, again, just having seen this movie fully and really just kind of still processing it, where I have to imagine, especially with the work that you guys do, the kernel for this having, after they worked on Short Circuit, it became such a big success. I have to imagine their kernel must have been very strong. I imagine that the script, as it was originally intended, envisioned, probably had a larger budget, maybe had a larger vision, but maybe in this case, full speculation, it involved a town with 4 buildings instead of, maybe 6 cars instead of 3. But there's a way where I imagine like it was already tight as it was, and almost putting the restraints on it on purpose to be like, let's not have the Graboids go into the city. We don't need to see that. We don't need to see Clint Eastwood in a fighter plane like fly over perfection and shoot it down. Like that's not what this is. If we keep this tight, like, yeah, then let's just, like you guys mentioned that term, plussing it. Like, well, how if we stay there, how can we just keep growing it and make this what the version of what it is bigger? Because I'm sure it's not always the case in the projects that you guys have worked on.
From whoever's running the show to whoever the executives are at the studio. A lot of times people are scared or worried or concerned. So let's just be a little more careful. It's not necessarily censorship, but it's just like, let's not go there if we don't have to. That starts cutting off all the corners. And pretty soon you got a round ball that's nobody's pretty interested in. It's like oatmeal. So to me, that's the worst. More so than, again, if you've got a budget constraint, that's a creative thing you can get around.
More accolades for Ron Underwood, who directed Tremors, for his first outing.
I think it's a really human movie. And if you look at Underwood's other work, like that's a through line. And like he did the Mighty Joe Young remake, which is something that I actually really like.
Really? Okay.
And like there's this vein of humanity that kind of runs throughout his movies, and there's this tone that I think is really, really similar. But I think, Ron being credited with the story, them working as a collaboration, and then him directing it, it's like, for me, that's an indicator that they were on the same page. Mm-hmm. And I think, in the work that Scott and I have done, it's like often there's times where we're not on the same page as the director. So the thing that we intended as writers and filmmakers in our own right, it's like, okay, well, it missed the mark because we were not, seeing eye to eye on this particular story. Clearly, like, these things were working in tandem, like this creative team really knew what this movie should be. It's like the proof is in the pudding, but is it? It wasn't a giant hit. It connected with us, right? It's one of our favorites that we come back to all the time. It's a totally, hugely successful movie, but, it's one of these things where, and, guys, we've talked about this. It's like when you're looking at Buckaroo Banzai or Big Trouble in Little China, these movies that people treasure, they weren't hugely accessible to a number of people, but we still consider them successful. Like every little piece of this thing works. Speaking of which, so as kind of last notes, Bernie, what's your kind of final takeaway after watching this? I know you mentioned because Scott and I want to make you watch it 3 more times.
I think hands down, revisiting it is something that I have to do. There's a movie, when you see a really good movie, you want to watch it again and you end up watching it from different perspectives. I think there's different brains kick in because you're watching it as a fan, but you're no longer watching it as like a first-time viewer. Have that shorthand. Oh, like that thing in Tremors. Oh, yeah. Now I know what that means. Now I get the reference.
The whole thing of like developing your critical eye, right? Like you watch it as a fan and you're kind of blown away, and then you look at it again and you're like, okay, I want to look behind the curtain a little bit. Like how did they actually do this? Like, I think there's some days when I won't stop talking about it. It's like I feel like Scott and I could like teach a class about all the things that you can learn from a movie like this because it has all these pieces that all work in tandem. Peter, what about you? Kind of what's your big takeaway?
Yeah, a couple. I mean, this is something to go back and to revisit too. Like, I feel like there's so much going on that you can kind of just dive into different pieces. I think it touches on some universal things. Like Scott, you mentioned at the beginning, like coming out of the theater and, not wanting to touch the ground. And I think that's just like a universal thing that we've all experienced at some point as kids, whether it's, don't touch the bottom of the pool when you're in the pool, the floor is lava.
Floor is lava, yeah.
That just like really tap into these things that you experience as a kid. And here it is on screen. But again, it's not overly, saturated on you. Like it's allowed to live within the story itself. And again, like I go back to some of the touch points of like the atomic monsters stuff and Jaws, obviously, it's the lesser Jaws, but Jaws 2, when the kids are all kind of have been attacked by the shark and they're all on their sailboats and kind of banded together and the shark's kind of circling them. I immediately thought of that in the scene when like the Graboids are kind of revolving around the rocks there. So there are these like subtle callbacks. And I just always, anytime I can come across something that I haven't seen, that I've missed the first time around and really appreciate it, then see it for what it is. And just be really pleasantly surprised like I was last night. It's a great thing for me. Nowadays, I find myself scrolling a lot through, movies that I've seen before. And it's like, I really like this movie. Do I want to watch it again right now? I don't know. But Tremors is definitely something that I will go back like you, Bernie. And, I want to dive into it some more because there's a lot there to the experience. And I'm glad that Scott, you and Josh were on here to share it with us because this has been great to talk about.
Scott, you have any final thoughts?
I have none.
That's
everything I know about Tremors.
That's why I asked. I want to throw out for people who are interested, there's a wonderful book out there called Seeking Perfection, The Unofficial Guide to Tremors by Jonathan Melville.
That's a great title. So
Ville. Yeah, and it's a fantastic book. Jonathan's a real fan, a great writer. And then I think if people want to check out like kind of up to the minute fun Tremors stuff at the Tremors Saga on Twitter, I would go follow the team. Thanks for letting us hijack the podcast.
For sure. I want to say thanks to at Tremors Saga for being very kind to retweet and like some of our like in live Pete and I watching or preparing to watch Tremors. So the fact that there are people out there they're evangelizing to a new generation of people who are discovering the movie for the first time like us, or maybe rewatching it. But Josh, I got to say thank you for, as you would say, throwing for this movie because you finally broke us down.
As Scott can vouch, I am exhausting.
Oh, dear God, he is.